Well, spank my rear and call me Oswald. Boys and girls, we got a healthy blast of Three Kingdoms Total War news, or, well, I guess it's Total War Three Kingdoms now. It always tripped me up when they changed the name. Anyway, and let me tell you, the hype train has hit Mach 10. Where do I even start? Between the South South trailer, the Xiapi footage, and now E3 coming up with more news promised? I don't even know! Let's start with the South South trailer breakdown, and then we'll look at the Xiapi footage, shall we? There's so much to pick apart! But first, in case you're not in the know, who is South Cao? Allow me to educate you. Cao Cao was an imperial minister and general during the end of the Han Dynasty. After a period of obstacles and roadblocks in his early career, he first found true success during the Yellow Turban Rebellion in 184, where he was one of many officials who saw action. However, his big break came during the year 189, where, after a failed assassination attempt against the tyrannical Dong Zhuo, he formed a coalition with Yuan Shao and other regional lords to stand against him. In both history and the novel, Cao Cao was one of the few lords that actively participated in the campaign. After the fall of Dong Zhuo and his subsequent death at the hands of his subordinate Liu Bu, a power vacuum was created, and Cao Cao ended up accumulating great amounts of it, partly thanks to his recovery of Emperor Xian of Han and enjoying the great privileges that came with the titles of Chancellor and Prime Minister. Despite being an ambitious man, Cao Cao never went as far as declaring himself emperor, even after taking the Han Emperor into his custody. Instead, he ruled as a vassal to the emperor as King of Wei, though in truth it was Cao Cao who actually wielded the true power. It was Cao Cao's heir, Xiapi, who would force the emperor off the throne and declare himself the first emperor of Wei, thus officially ushering in the Three Kingdoms period in 220. Cao Cao is remembered for his military genius, administrative skills, and power-hungry ambition. It's the last reason that has mostly led to his vilification in the cultural legacy of the Three Kingdoms period, though he does have a few atrocities under his belt as well. In the novel, Cao Cao quickly becomes a fallen hero and primary antagonist for Liu Bei, the first emperor of Shu. In many ways, it is a misleading representation of a man who was known for treating his generals like family and believed very heavily in the values of economic strength and education. A lot of recent media has made efforts to tweak or correct this image. The Cao Cao we see in the trailer appears to be just that, a calculated strategist who teeters on the cusps of villain and hero. The opening shot sums this up perfectly. Cao Cao sits in front of an inflamed city. His men chant his name as a war cry, a symbol of courage to them and fear to his enemies. It is then that Cao Cao states his intentions to save the land from the suffering that has befallen it. In the trailer, we also meet Yuan Shao, who is another warlord and was indeed a childhood friend of Cao Cao. Yuan Shao was from a very distinguished lineage, and he would, like Cao Cao, accumulate vast amounts of power after the central government's collapse and become one of Cao Cao's major rivals. The village massacre we see is another good example of Cao Cao's character. He clearly expresses regret at his actions, but he pushes forward, determining it necessary to fulfill his future ambitions. During the coalition against Dong Zhuo, most of the coalition members did very little. The bulk of the fighting was done by Sun Jian in history, with mostly Cao Cao providing assistance where needed. The novel adds in a few others, such as Liu Bei and the forces of Gongsun Zan actively participating, but the core fact remains the same. Many of the lords were too concerned with gaining or losing political leverage over the others instead of banding together. Cao Cao noticed this very early on and was among the first of the lords to actually abandon the coalition after Dong Zhuo fled to Chang'an. Now, this battlefield shot looks appropriately large in scale. Behind Yuan Shao, we get our first look at some general models, too. It seems like we'll be going the Dynasty Warriors route, where the more famous generals have unique models while others are more generic. We see these same two guys again here, and then we also see them again here, working for Cao Cao, which kind of indicates that they're no one special. Later on, when Cao Cao's generals bow to him, we can see clearly a number of generals who have some degree of uniqueness to them. The most obvious is Xiahou Dun, with his missing eye in the front, though there seems to be quite a number of unique looking characters going by their helmets and armor which stand out. For instance, I'm fairly certain that on the far left is Shu Huang, based on his signature white turban. Because of the Xiapi footage that got released a little later, you can also clearly pick out Yue Jin, and also someone who's probably Xiahou Yuan. Also interesting is you can spot what seems to be Zhong Liao in the front, indicating that you will indeed be able to perhaps capture and recruit generals from other factions. Beautiful shot of Cao Cao right there on one of his famous horses. My Chinese, as many have pointed out to me, is god-awful, so I won't bother saying the actual name. But yes, that's Shadowrunner from Dynasty Warriors. Even though Yuan Shao was Cao Cao's friend and they were initially allies, that relationship would fall apart, and they would eventually go to war against each other in 200. Most famously at the Battle of Guandu. We get a glimpse of what's most likely that battle here, with the siege of Cao Cao's fort, though we could also be looking at the raid on Wuchao, or the battles of Bai Ma and Yanjin. And yes, I will admit to looking very carefully to see if I could find Guan Yu, who briefly served Cao Cao in 200, but alas, I could not. At the end of the trailer, we get the appearance of Liu Bei, who, as I mentioned before, would become Cao Cao's chief rival, and we'll probably get a full trailer dedicated to him sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, I don't know the rules of Go, nor can I read Chinese characters, but this shot clearly has some significance, and my hunch is that this might say something, but again, I have no clue.
For I would rather betray the world than have the world betray me.
Ah, the famous line that sums up who Cao Cao is to a T. Overall, I'm giving this trailer a 15 out of 17 and has me really excited to see more. Now, let's pivot to the Xiapi footage. But before we do, there's a couple of other tidbits of info that got dropped. For instance, Three Kingdoms is going to have 2 modes for campaign, and probably multiplayer too, Romance and Classic mode. Romance mode is going to have events that follow the novel, powerful generals akin to the legendary lords from Warhammer, and generals will be able to duel each other on the battle map. Classic mode is much more the traditional Total War experience, and strives to be historically accurate, putting generals into bodyguards, and events will follow the historically accurate records of the Three Kingdoms. I think this is the smartest decision they could have made with this game, and it's a good way to satisfy a sizable chunk of the fan base who had concerns that this historical Total War game might be a little too fantastical for their tastes. I'm interested in playing both, personally, and I will definitely be doing at least one campaign in each mode when the game comes out. Also, we got news that the game is delayed to spring 2019, to which my response is, good! Take as long as you need to. If this game isn't good, after the disaster that Dynasty Warriors 9 was, I might just give up on life and become a hermit in the woods. So please, Creative Assembly, take all the time you need. Just don't pull a Blizzard and take 30 years to make 2 expansions to StarCraft 2 and we're golden. And it got revealed that one of the historical experts they've been working with is Rafe Di Crispigny. We in good hands, boys. Now, very interestingly, we got a reveal of some pre-alpha gameplay footage showcasing the Battle of Xiapi. This is exciting to me for a number of reasons. Obviously, the first is gameplay footage, but it also indicates that historical battles will appear in the game to at least some respect. I personally would love for historical battles in both campaign and multiplayer. If my inkling is right, these are the battles I would be shocked if they did not appear in the game and are almost guaranteed. There is, of course, limitless potential for possible historical battles too. Pretty much every Dynasty Warriors stage could be a historical battle. Which leads me to hoping there is some type of easy-to-use custom scenario / custom battle creator besides just the standard custom battle option we're used to. There is one other aspect I'm curious about from the Xiapi footage we saw, and I couldn't help but notice that Xiapi wasn't flooded. Historically, as part of the months-long siege, Cao Cao had his men divert the river to flood Xiapi, and it was flooded for a solid month. Flooding also played a major role in another important battle down the line during the Battle of Fan Cheng, or Fan Castle. It might just be something that wasn't implemented yet, but I'm hoping that such events might be possible during battles, even if it's only during scripted historical battles. With the battle footage, we get a glimpse of a lot of things, and there's hints that more expanded footage will be revealed at E3. First, Lu Bu's horse, Red Hare, appears, and apparently there will be lootable gear and items a la Warhammer that generals can use. Zhong Liao is present on Lu Bu's faction, And there is an unnamed strategist who I can only assume is Chen Gong. I find it interesting that Zhang Liao is included at Xiapi, because in both history and novel he was not present at that battle, and Zhang Liao was also nowhere near one of Lu Bu's most important subordinates. Zhang Liao didn't reach any real level of fame until he came to serve Cao Cao. It should really be Gao Shun or Song Xian, or another major Lu Bu subordinate. The fact that Lu Bu is on his own and is his own faction, and we see Zhang Liao will later serve Cao Cao in the trailer, says to me that generals will be able to defect, change sides, and perhaps even rebel and form their own factions, which would be really cool if it's true. Armies are now split up by generals controlling a retinue. This is a cool touch and is pretty accurate to how Chinese armies function. As we see later, a second army joins the fight with Xiahou Dun and probably Xiahou Yuan, and looking at the UI, there appears to be plenty of room to field at least 2 full armies in a battle, so there is hopefully potential for some truly massive battles. There is also going to be hybrid units which can serve multiple roles on the battlefield, such as an archer and spear hybrid unit we get a look at. Some units can also form different formations like the turtle formation that they show off with the spear units. And units can employ grappling hooks to scale walls. I'm hoping that the grappling hook mechanic is sort of like the cheap and quick option, while something like siege towers will be the safer and slower alternative. There are also going to be different kinds of generals. Those like Yue Jin will be excellent melee fighters and excel in battle, while others like Cao Cao will be more important for maintaining morale and using advanced formations. I think this is cool, and if there's even more types, we can see a lot of variety and strategies forming based around who your generals are, what kind of troops you choose to have them command, and even how many you might want to put under their command. It's been announced that generals can talk during battles, and we do see that a little bit with Cao Cao and Zhang Liao, and they can form both good and bad relationships, and this will be reflected in the things they say. At the end of the trailer, we see Xiahou Dun engage Lu Bu in a duel, which, while still being pre-alpha, looks very cool and fluid. It fascinates me, though, that they'll be going with a warrior depiction of Xiahou Dun, as historically the man wasn't actually the best warrior or commander. He was actually a good administrator, but the other stuff not so much. It must be influenced from Koei. As far as the duels go, apparently generals can initiate them at any time during the battle, although I suspect there's sort of like a minimum range requirement where you have to be nearby, because if you look, when they click on the duel button, Xiahou Dun can only duel Lu Bu. He doesn't have an option to duel like Zhang Liao. So it could also be possible that some generals are duelable while others are not, but we'll have to wait to find out. Anyway, duels are either to the death or retreat, and they can heavily affect morale. Troops won't interfere with the duels when they occur. I'm hoping we have some control over the situation, such as choosing to retreat prematurely if need be, or set our duel mode to stun instead of kill in case we have plans to later capture enemy generals, especially if that's how characters like Zhang Liao will join our forces. There's also no mention if duels are just one-on-one, or if multiple generals can fight a duel. After all, the most famous duel of the novel is when the 3 sworn brothers fight Lu Bu together. Speaking of, I also noticed a lack of Liu Bei at Xiapi, as he was in an alliance with Cao Cao and did participate in the siege. It could be he wasn't included in the demo, but alliances during battles was a big part of the era, and several important battles had multiple lords working in tandem. Hopefully we learn more about how that might play out in the game in the near future. I also really like the UI we see. It isn't as intrusive as the past games have been, and it looks like it will be really easy to navigate, and really intuitive. I hope they don't change too much about it because it's a welcome change from the super cluttered battle UI the past few games have had. So all this said and done, I am super excited to see more. I'd love if at E3 we got an extended look at the battle, and maybe even saw it play out in classic mode as well to really see the difference between the 2 modes. Anything major that drops from E3 for this game, I'm going to try and cover. There's also a few other games I'm mega excited about, some of whom may or may not officially exist, that if they get announced, I'll be giving my thoughts on as well. So be sure to check back if you're interested. And if you're still in the mood for some 3 Kingdoms, check out my other videos when the game was first announced to hear my initial thoughts, get some predictions, some of which were right on the money, I'd say, and learn quite a bit about the era. Until then, my friends, keep it real.